The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the massive crystal chamber that floated in the void between star systems. Representatives from 237 civilizations gathered around the circular platform, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, telepathic pulses, and translated speech. At the center of it all stood High Chancellor Vexter of the Zephyrian Empire, his four arms gesturing dramatically as he addressed the assembly. Fellow beings of the galaxy, Vexter's voice resonated through the translation matrix, reaching every species in their native tongue. We face an unprecedented crisis. The Devourer fleet has returned from the dark sectors of space, and their numbers have grown beyond our worst projections. They consume entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty void in their wake. A collective shudder ran through the assembly. The Devourer fleet was the stuff of nightmares, biomechanical monstrosities that converted matter into more of themselves, spreading like a cosmic plague across the galaxy. They had appeared once before, 3,000 years ago, and only the combined might of every known civilization had managed to drive them back into the unknown regions of space. Ambassador Keth of the Crystalline Consortium spoke up, her voice chiming like broken glass. Our deep space monitoring stations report the fleet has consumed the Outer Rim colonies. 73 inhabited worlds are gone. The fleet's core mass is estimated at 47 million vessels, with production capabilities that increase exponentially. Murmurs of fear rippled through the chamber. The numbers were staggering. During their last incursion, the Devourer fleet had numbered only 12 million ships. They had grown beyond anyone's ability to comprehend. What of the warrior species? Called out General Krex of the Saurian hegemony, his reptilian features twisted with concern. The Valdans, the Korthax Dominion, surely their military might can. Already engaged, interrupted Admiral Thys of the Galactic Defense Force, her tentacles writhing with agitation. The Valdan 3rd Battle Group made contact with the fleet's advanced scouts near the Helios Nebula. They were completely destroyed. 200,000 warriors gone in less than an hour. The chamber fell silent except for the hum of the translation matrix. The Valdans were legendary for their combat prowess. Each warrior was genetically enhanced from birth, trained in 100 forms of warfare, and equipped with weapons that could crack planets. They had never known defeat in 10,000 years of galactic history. High Chancellor Vexter's expression grew grim. The Korthax Dominion fared no better. Their 7th war pack encountered the fleet near the Andros system. The result was the same, total annihilation. The Devourers have evolved. Their tactics are more sophisticated, their weapons more deadly, their hunger more insatiable. A being that looked like a floating jellyfish pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Through the translator, its words came out as a melodic tone. What of the ancient protocols, the emergency measures established after the last incursion? We have activated all defensive grids across 17 sectors, Vexter replied. Fortress worlds are being evacuated. The Titan-class defense platforms are being brought online. But our military analysts estimate we have perhaps 6 months before the fleet reaches the core worlds, and that's only if we can slow their advance significantly. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien voices, each species offering suggestions, voicing fears, or demanding action. Some called for immediate evacuation to other galaxies. Others proposed diplomatic contact with the Devourers. A few suggested activating ancient superweapons that had been banned since the last galactic war. Through the chaos, a small voice spoke up. What about the humans? The noise gradually died down as all attention turned to the speaker, Ambassador Zilt of the Trade Federation, a small, insectoid being whose compound eyes reflected the chamber's light. A sound that might have been laughter came from several delegates. Ambassador Keth's crystalline form shimmered with what appeared to be amusement. The humans? Surely you jest, small one. They are barely above primitive status. They have only just achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century. Indeed, added General Krex, his voice heavy with disdain. The humans are pacifists by nature. Their own historical records show they have spent more time fighting amongst themselves than developing any meaningful military capability. They lack the genetic enhancements of the Valdans, the technological supremacy of the Korthax, or the tactical brilliance of the Zephyrians. Admiral Thys's tentacles waved dismissively. I have reviewed their military capabilities. Their weapons are chemically based, projectiles and explosives, primitive beyond measure. Their largest warships are smaller than our escort vessels. They have no energy shields, no plasma weaponry, no gravitational manipulators. What could they possibly offer against a threat that has destroyed our greatest warriors? Ambassador Zilt's antennae twitched nervously. I merely thought that with all options exhausted, perhaps. The humans, interrupted High Chancellor Vexter, his voice carrying the authority of eons, are known throughout the galaxy for one thing above all others, their aversion to violence. Their delegation to this council has consistently voted against military action in every conflict of the past 50 years. They speak endlessly of peaceful solutions, diplomatic resolutions, and nonviolent alternatives. They are philosophers and dreamers, not warriors. The crystalline ambassador's form brightened with what seemed like contempt. I have observed their behavior during crisis situations. When faced with conflict, they retreat into debate and discussion. They form committees to study problems rather than take decisive action. They are paralyzed by their own moral constraints. Their military doctrine is defensive in nature, added General Krex. They speak of peacekeeping and humanitarian missions. They have no understanding of total warfare, of what it means to face an enemy that cannot be reasoned with, cannot be deterred, and will not stop until everything is consumed. A new voice joined the discussion, Commander Zax of the Hive Mind Collective, speaking through one of his drone bodies. We have analyzed human psychological profiles extensively. They show remarkable empathy for other species, even former enemies. This emotional weakness would be fatal against the Devourers. They would hesitate at crucial moments, seeking to understand rather than destroy. The floating jellyfish being pulsed again. There is also the matter of their physical limitations. They possess no natural armor, no enhanced strength, no ability to survive in hostile environments without artificial support. The average human would not survive 5 minutes in direct combat with a Devourer scout. Ambassador Zilt's voice grew smaller, but their innovation is focused on civilian applications, cut off Admiral Thiss. Medical technology, agricultural improvements, entertainment systems. They waste their intellectual resources on improving quality of life rather than developing weapons of war. It is an admirable trait in peacetime, but utterly useless when facing extinction. High Chancellor Vexter raised his forearms for silence. The human question is settled. While we respect their contributions to galactic culture and commerce, they simply lack the martial spirit necessary for this crisis. The Devourers do not negotiate. They do not show mercy. They exist only to consume and multiply. Facing them requires warriors with hearts of stone and the will to commit absolute destruction. Besides, added General Krex with a rumbling laugh, the humans themselves would likely refuse any request for military assistance. Their own leaders have publicly stated their desire to see the galaxy move beyond warfare altogether. They would probably propose a peace summit with the Devourers. The chamber filled with what passed for laughter among the various species. The idea of attempting diplomacy with entities that existed only to devour all life was absurd beyond measure. Commander Zax's drone spoke again. Our simulations show that if the humans were somehow compelled to fight, their forces would last approximately 14 hours against a minor Devourer probe fleet. They lack the killer instinct that separates true warriors from mere soldiers. The humans, declared High Chancellor Vexter with finality, are not a military species. They are merchants, philosophers, and artists. They have value in peaceful times, but in war, they are a liability that we cannot afford to protect while also mounting an effective defense against the fleet. The discussion moved on to other topics: evacuation protocols, defensive strategies, and resource allocation. The question of human involvement was dismissed so thoroughly that it was never formally recorded in the session's official minutes. To the assembled representatives of the galaxy's greatest civilizations, humanity was simply irrelevant to the greatest military crisis in galactic history. Unknown to the Council, however, their assumptions about humanity were based on carefully crafted public personas and diplomatic positions that revealed nothing about mankind's true nature. The humans had learned long ago that appearing harmless was often the greatest strategic advantage of all. In a secure facility buried beneath the lunar surface of Earth's moon, Director Sarah Chen reviewed the intelligence reports from the Galactic Council session. The chamber was filled with screens displaying tactical data, fleet movements, and threat assessments. Around her, the finest military minds in human space worked quietly at their stations. "Ma'am," called out Colonel Martinez from his position at the central console. "The council session has concluded. As predicted, they dismissed any possibility of human involvement." Chen nodded slowly. She was a small woman in her 50s, unremarkable in appearance except for her eyes, which held a hardness that spoke of difficult decisions made in dark times. "And the Devourer fleet's current position?" "Approximately 6 months from the core worlds, assuming they maintain current speed," replied Lieutenant Commander Park from the sensor analysis station. "But our deep space reconnaissance suggests they're actually accelerating. The Council's timeline might be optimistic." "Any changes to their behavior patterns since the last incursion?" Chen asked. "Significant changes," answered Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the mission's xenobiological specialist. "They're more coordinated, more tactical. The historical records show they used to attack in straight lines, consuming everything in their path. Now they're demonstrating strategic thinking, hitting supply lines, avoiding heavily defended positions until they can concentrate superior numbers." Chen walked to the main display, which showed a three-dimensional representation of the galaxy with red markers indicating Devourer positions. The red dots formed a growing wave that was steadily approaching the dense cluster of worlds that made up galactic civilization's heart. "They've learned," she said quietly. 3,000 years in the dark sectors, and they've evolved beyond just being a swarm. They're becoming an actual military force." "Ma'am," interrupted Captain Jackson from the communications station, "we're receiving reports from our embedded observers with the Valden and Korthax fleets. The destruction was even more complete than the Council knows. The Devourers didn't just defeat these forces, they analyzed them, adapted to their tactics in real time, and then completely overwhelmed them." Chen turned back to her staff. "Which means that when we face them, we'll have one advantage the others didn't. They won't expect us to be anything more than what we've shown the galaxy for the past century." Colonel Martinez looked up from his console. "Director, the War Cabinet is ready for your briefing. Should I patch them in?" "Proceed," Chen replied. The main screen shifted to show a secure conference room where Earth's senior leadership waited. President Harrison sat at the head of the table, flanked by the Joint Chiefs of Staff and key cabinet members. To anyone monitoring galactic communications, this would appear to be just another routine diplomatic briefing. "Mr. President," Chen began, "the situation is proceeding as our strategic analysts predicted 15 years ago. The Galactic Council has committed their primary military assets against an enemy they don't fully understand, and they've suffered catastrophic losses." "What's our current assessment of Devourer capabilities?" asked General Thompson, chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Dr. Tanaka took over the briefing. "Based on our analysis of the engagement data, the Devourers have evolved beyond simple consumption protocols. They now demonstrate learning algorithms that allow them to adapt to enemy tactics within hours of first contact. They've also developed what appears to be a command hierarchy, suggesting individual units can now operate with strategic autonomy. In layman's terms," added Colonel Martinez, "they're no longer just hungry monsters. They're hungry monsters with military training and the ability to learn from their mistakes instantly." President Harrison leaned forward, and the galaxy's response. "Exactly as predicted," Chen replied. "They're falling back on traditional military doctrine, superior firepower, advanced technology, and genetic enhancements. They're fighting the last war, not this one." "What about their assessment of us?" asked Secretary of Defense Williams. Chen allowed herself a slight smile. "Also exactly as predicted. They see us as pacifist philosophers who lack the stomach for real warfare. They believe we would be a liability in any military operation." The president nodded slowly. "Then they have no idea what they're dealing with." "None at all, sir," Chen confirmed. "To them, we're the species that spends more time in committee meetings than in combat training. They see our public face, the diplomatic corps that votes for peaceful resolutions and humanitarian aid. They have no knowledge of what lies beneath." General Thompson studied the tactical displays. "How long until we implement the contingency protocols?" "The Devourer fleet will reach the Terran defense perimeter in approximately 4 months," Chen replied. "But we won't wait for them to come to us. We'll move when the Council forces have been sufficiently degraded, but not so weakened that they can't serve as a distraction." "And if the Council requests our assistance?" asked the President. "They won't," Chen said with certainty. Their arrogance will prevent them from asking for help from what they consider an inferior species. By the time they realize their mistake, it will be too late for coordinated action. Colonel Martinez added another data point. Sir, our psychological profiles suggest that even if the Council faced total defeat, they would assume human forces would simply be destroyed even faster. They cannot conceive of us as anything other than what we've shown them. The President was quiet for several moments, studying the strategic situation. Director Chen, confirm our readiness status. The combined fleet is fully operational and standing by at alert stations throughout human space, Chen reported. All special operations teams are in position. Strategic weapons are armed and targeted. The Defense Corps has completed final training cycles. We are ready to implement the Revelation Protocol on your command. And our allies? The quiet compact remains intact, Chen replied, referring to the secret alliance humanity had built with several species that also preferred to keep their true capabilities hidden. They're ready to coordinate when we make our move. General Thompson looked at the tactical displays one more time. The galaxy is about to learn that there's a difference between choosing not to fight and being unable to fight. President Harrison nodded grimly. Proceed with Phase 1 of the Revelation Protocol. It's time the galaxy discovered what humans are really capable of when we stop pretending to be harmless. As the secure connection ended, Director Chen turned back to her staff. Around the room, humans who had spent decades preparing for this moment worked with quiet efficiency. The galaxy had made its assumptions about humanity based on carefully crafted deception. Soon, those assumptions would prove to be the most catastrophic intelligence failure in galactic history. The Devourer fleet continued its advance, unaware that it was about to encounter something it had never faced before, a species that had turned warfare into an art form, then hidden that art behind a mask of peaceful philosophy for over a century. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology or genetic enhancement. It was the element of surprise. 3 weeks after the Council session, the Devourer fleet's advance elements struck the heavily fortified Meridian defense line. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it ended, 93 worlds had fallen, and the combined fleets of 7 major civilizations had been reduced to scattered debris fields drifting through space. High Chancellor Vexter stood before the emergency assembly, his 4 arms trembling with barely controlled fear. The crystal chamber that had once seemed so secure now felt like a tomb as representatives from across the galaxy listened to the horrifying battle reports. The defense platforms at Rigel Station fired continuously for 6 hours, Admiral Thiss reported, her voice hollow with shock. Their quantum disruption cannons cut through the first wave of Devourer vessels like they were made of paper. We thought we had found their weakness. What happened? Asked Ambassador Keth, her crystalline form dim with worry. They adapted, Admiral Thiss replied. By the 7th hour, the same weapons were having no effect. The Devourers had somehow modified their hulls to absorb the quantum energy and convert it into additional power for their own systems. General Krex slammed his clawed fist against his control panel. Impossible. Quantum disruption technology has been our primary weapon for millennia. No biological entity could adapt to it so quickly. Yet they did, came the reply from General Vorthan of the Nexus Coalition, his voice transmitted from the front lines. I witnessed it personally. The Devourers' hulls began glowing with the same energy signatures as our weapons. Then they started firing our own quantum disruption beams back at us. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. The idea that the Devourers could not only adapt to their weapons, but actually turn them against their creators was beyond anything they had imagined. Commander Zax's drone body stepped forward. Our tactical analysis is complete. The Devourers are not simply consuming and reproducing. They are learning at an exponential rate. Each engagement teaches them new strategies, new defenses, new ways to use our own technology against us. Then we change tactics, declared High Chancellor Vexter, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. We use different weapons, different strategies. We cannot allow ourselves to become predictable. We have tried, replied Admiral Thiss. The Korthax Death Fleet deployed their experimental plasma weapons, technology so new that we had not even shared it with our allies. The Devourers adapted to those within 3 hours. The floating jellyfish being pulsed with distressed patterns. How is such rapid adaptation possible? Our best xenobiologists estimate that genetic modification should take generations, not hours. Dr. Zenth, the Council's chief science advisor, materialized in the chamber through holographic projection. His ancient form, he was over 800 years old, showed signs of exhaustion that spoke to sleepless days analyzing the crisis. Honored delegates, Dr. Zenth began, our analysis suggests the Devourers have evolved beyond biological limitations. They appear to be using quantum biological processors that can rewrite their genetic structure in real time. Each individual unit is essentially a living supercomputer capable of instant evolution. Meaning, asked General Krex. Meaning they learn from every exchange of fire, every tactical maneuver, every strategic decision we make, Dr. Zenth explained. Worse, they share this knowledge instantly across their entire fleet through quantum entanglement networks. When one devourer learns to counter our weapons, they all learn simultaneously. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. They were facing an enemy that became stronger with every battle, that turned their own advantages against them, and that shared knowledge faster than any communication system they possessed. What of our remaining military assets? Asked High Chancellor Vexter. Admiral Thiss consulted her displays with hands that shook slightly. The 7th Battle Group is falling back toward the Centaurus worlds. The 9th and 12th fleets are attempting to regroup near the Vega system, but casualties are approaching 70% across all formations. The Fortress worlds. Andromeda Station was evacuated successfully, but Fortress Gamma held its position and was completely overrun. The Devourers consumed the entire planetoid and used its mass to construct 3 new hive ships. Ambassador Zilt's antennae drooped with despair. At this rate, they will reach the core worlds within weeks, not months. There must be something we have overlooked, insisted General Krex. Some weakness, some vulnerability we have not exploited. Dr. Zenth shook his ancient head. We have analyzed every piece of data from the engagements. The Devourers show no consistent weaknesses. Their adaptive capability appears to have no upper limit. They learn from our successes as quickly as they do from our failures. The discussion continued for hours, with various delegates proposing increasingly desperate strategies. Some suggested awakening the ancient war machines sealed since the last galactic conflict. Others proposed evacuating entire star systems and implementing scorched Earth tactics. A few even suggested attempting to flee the galaxy entirely. Through it all, a small voice in the back of Ambassador Zilt's mind kept returning to the same thought. In his species' culture, when all conventional wisdom failed, sometimes the most unlikely solutions proved most effective. He had mentioned the humans once before and been dismissed, but the situation had become far more desperate since then. As the session wound down with no clear resolution, Ambassador Zilt made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. He quietly left the main assembly and made his way to the communication center in the lower levels of the Council station. The human embassy was a modest facility in the diplomatic quarter of Council Station Alpha. Unlike the grand structures of the major powers, which projected strength through architectural magnificence, the human embassy was notable for its simplicity. Functional design, minimal ornamentation, and an overall impression of practical efficiency rather than grandeur. Ambassador Zilt had never visited the human embassy before. Few delegates had, as humanity kept a relatively low profile in council affairs. As he approached the entrance, he noticed something that seemed odd. The security measures were far more sophisticated than they appeared. What looked like simple access controls were actually scanning him with technologies he didn't recognize. The human ambassador, a middle-aged woman named Rebecca Shaw, greeted him in a simple office that could have belonged to any mid-level bureaucrat. She was unremarkable in appearance, with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes that spoke of someone who had spent more time in diplomatic discussions than military planning. Ambassador Zilt, she said with genuine warmth, this is an unexpected pleasure. Please have a seat. Can I offer you any refreshments? Her manner was so ordinary, so peaceful, that Zilt almost changed his mind. How could these beings, who seemed more concerned with hospitality than warfare, possibly offer any solution to a crisis that had defeated the galaxy's greatest military powers? Ambassador Shaw, he began hesitantly, I come to you with what others would consider a foolish request. I'm listening, she replied, pouring herself a cup of tea with steady hands that showed no sign of the stress that was consuming most galactic leaders. The situation with the Devourer fleet has become dire. Our most powerful military forces have been defeated. Our most advanced weapons have been turned against us. I know that humanity has chosen the path of peace, but I wondered if perhaps there might be some way, some small contribution. He trailed off, feeling foolish for even making the request. Ambassador Shaw sipped her tea thoughtfully, her expression revealing nothing. Ambassador Zilt, she said finally, what exactly do you know about human history? The question surprised him. I know that your species has chosen to move beyond warfare. Your delegation consistently votes for peaceful solutions to galactic conflicts. You have shown admirable restraint in avoiding military entanglements. Ambassador Shaw smiled, but something in her eyes had changed. The warmth was still there, but behind it, Zilt glimpsed something he hadn't expected, a depth of knowledge and experience that seemed at odds with humanity's reputation. That's what we've chosen to show the galaxy, she said quietly. But tell me, in your species' history, have you ever encountered a predator that used camouflage to hunt? Zilt's compound eyes shifted nervously. Yes, of course, many creatures use deception to approach their prey. And what happens when such a predator decides it no longer needs to hide? Before Zilt could answer, Ambassador Shaw touched a control on her desk. The office's windows, which had showed a peaceful view of the station's commercial district, suddenly became opaque. The lighting changed, and displays emerged from hidden panels in the walls. Within seconds, the simple diplomat's office had transformed into something that looked distinctly military. Ambassador Zilt, Shaw said, her voice taking on an authority that hadn't been there moments before. Humanity has been observing the galaxy for over a century. We've studied every species, every military doctrine, every strategic philosophy. We've learned from all of you. The displays showed tactical analyses, fleet compositions, and battle simulations that demonstrated a level of military sophistication that left Zilt speechless. This wasn't the work of peaceful philosophers. This was the product of minds that understood warfare at the deepest levels. You've all made the same mistake, Shaw continued. You've assumed that choosing not to fight means being unable to fight. Humanity learned long ago that the most dangerous predator is the one that doesn't look dangerous. But your voting record, Zilt stammered, your diplomatic positions, were carefully calculated to maintain an image that served our interests, Shaw replied. We voted for peace because we knew that someday the galaxy would face something it couldn't handle with conventional military thinking. We knew that when that time came, our greatest advantage would be that no one would suspect what we're really capable of. She touched another control, and new displays showed human military assets that defied everything the galaxy believed about humanity's capabilities. Ships that were works of art in their lethality, weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics, and strategic analyses that demonstrated a grasp of warfare that went far beyond anything the Council had imagined. The Devourers adapt to conventional military thinking because that's all they've encountered, Shaw explained. They've learned to counter energy weapons, genetic enhancements, and traditional tactical doctrines, but they've never faced an enemy that thinks differently about warfare itself. Zilt stared at the displays in shock. You've been preparing for this. We've been preparing for something like this, Shaw corrected. We knew that eventually the galaxy would encounter a threat that couldn't be defeated with superior firepower alone. We've spent the past century developing approaches to warfare that the Devourers have never seen. What kind of approaches? Ambassador Shaw's smile became predatory. The kind that our own history taught us when we were still confined to a single world. You see, Ambassador Zilt, humanity didn't become peaceful because we were naturally gentle. We became peaceful because we became too good at warfare to safely practice it among ourselves. She gestured to a historical display that showed humanity's conflicts on Earth. We fought each other for millennia with increasing sophistication. We learned that the most effective warfare isn't about having the biggest weapons. It's about understanding your enemy better than they understand themselves. The Devourers learn and adapt, Zilt said, beginning to understand. They do, Shaw agreed. But they're learning from species that think about warfare in predictable ways. They've never encountered a species that weaponized unpredictability itself. She activated another display that showed strategic scenarios unlike anything in galactic military doctrine. Instead of focusing on direct confrontation, the human strategies emphasized misdirection, psychological warfare, and attacks on assumptions rather than assets. Every species in the galaxy fights the way they think, Shaw explained. The Valdans fight with honor and genetic superiority. The Korthax fight with overwhelming technology. The Zephyrians fight with tactical precision. All of these approaches are logical, predictable, and ultimately adaptable. And humans? We fight dirty, Shaw said simply. We cheat, we lie, we attack in ways that our enemies don't expect because they can't imagine anyone thinking the way we do. Zilt felt a chill that had nothing to do with the office temperature. You're not what you appear to be. No, Ambassador Shaw agreed. We're not. The question is, Ambassador Zilt, what are you prepared to do with that knowledge? She leaned forward, and for the first time since entering the office, Zilt felt like he was in the presence of a predator that had decided to reveal itself. The Galactic Council has dismissed humanity as irrelevant to this crisis, Shaw continued. They believe we lack the stomach for real warfare. They think we would be a liability rather than an asset. And if they knew the truth, they would panic, Shaw said bluntly. They would demand to know why we've hidden our capabilities. They would want to integrate human forces into their existing command structures and strategic doctrines. They would, in other words, waste our greatest advantage. Zilt understood, the element of surprise. Exactly. The Devourers have adapted to every conventional approach the galaxy can offer. But they've never encountered humanity at war, because until now, humanity has never been at war. They have no data to work with, no patterns to analyze, no previous engagements to learn from. What do you need from the Council? Ambassador Shaw's expression became businesslike. Nothing official. In fact, it's essential that the Council continue to believe we're irrelevant. What we need is information, real-time intelligence on Devourer movements, capabilities, and tactics. We need to know everything the Council learns about them without the Council knowing we're involved. And in return, Shaw said with a smile that would have made a Devourer nervous, the galaxy gets to discover what happens when humanity stops pretending to be harmless. Ambassador Zilt left the human embassy with his mind reeling. Everything he thought he knew about humans had been revealed as carefully crafted misdirection. The peaceful philosophers were actually apex predators who had been quietly studying the galaxy's military capabilities for over a century. As he made his way back to his quarters, he realized that the galaxy's greatest crisis might also become its salvation. The Devourers had adapted to conventional warfare, but they were about to encounter something they had never seen before: humans who had finally decided to stop hiding what they really were. In secure facilities across human space, ancient protocols were being activated. Ships that had never appeared on galactic registries were powering up their drives. Weapons that defied conventional understanding of physics were being armed. And most importantly, minds that had been shaped by humanity's long history of warfare were finally being unleashed on an enemy that had no idea what it was about to face. The galaxy had dismissed humanity as irrelevant to its greatest military crisis. Soon, that dismissal would prove to be the most catastrophic intelligence failure in galactic history. The first sign that something had changed came during what the Devourer fleet classified as a routine consumption operation at the Kepler 442 system. The system contained 3 mining colonies and a research station, minimal defensive capability, and significant biomass for conversion. According to their tactical analysis, it should have been completely consumed within 6 hours. 13 hours later, the advance units were still fighting. Hive Mind Designation Omega-7, commanding the operation, processed this anomaly with growing confusion. The mining colonies had been evacuated as expected, but the research station had not only remained operational, it was actively engaging Devourer forces with weapons that defied analysis. The station appeared to be defended by a single species Omega-7 had not encountered before. They were bipedal, physically unremarkable, and should have been easy prey for even basic Devourer units. Yet these beings were fighting with a tactical sophistication that exceeded anything in the collective's combat database. More disturbing was the fact that they seemed to understand Devourer capabilities better than the Devourers understood theirs. Every adaptive response the collective implemented was met with a counter-response that suggested these beings had studied devourer evolution patterns extensively. When the plasma cannons were deployed, the defenders used reflective shields that turned the energy back into the launch tubes, causing sympathetic detonations. When the collective adapted with kinetic weapons, the defenders responded with gravitational manipulators that redirected the projectiles into other devourer units. When biomechanical boarding pods were launched, they were met with energy fields that caused cascade failures in their organic components. Most confusing of all, the defenders' weapons seemed designed specifically to counter devourer adaptive capabilities. Instead of using energy patterns that could be analyzed and copied, they employed chaotic frequencies that changed faster than even quantum biological processors could adapt to them. Omega-7 requested reinforcements. 2 additional hive minds and 3 construction vessels were dispatched to what should have been a minor skirmish. The research station continued to resist, and the unknown defenders began transmitting messages in Galactic Common. "This is Commander Sarah Mitchell of the Terran Defense Corps," came the transmission. "We are here to give you a message to carry back to your fleet." Omega-7 analyzed the communication. Terran was listed in their database as referring to the species called humans, classified as militarily insignificant and designated as a low-priority target. The classification made no sense given current combat performance. "You are scheduled for consumption," Omega-7 replied, using the standard devourer response to communication attempts. "Resistance delays the inevitable. Submit for efficient processing." "We're not here to resist," Commander Mitchell replied. "We're here to teach you something about warfare you've never learned. We're here to show you what happens when you fight a species that doesn't think like everyone else." Before Omega-7 could analyze this statement, the humans implemented a tactical maneuver that violated every principle of defensive warfare in the collective's database. Instead of maintaining their defensive position, the research station suddenly accelerated directly toward the largest concentration of devourer vessels. The station, which sensors had classified as a purely scientific facility, began transforming. Sections that had appeared to be research modules unfolded into weapon systems that bore no resemblance to any known galactic technology. The station itself was becoming a warship, but its design philosophy was unlike anything the Devourers had encountered. Instead of energy shields, it used ablative armor that was designed to be destroyed and replaced continuously. Instead of focusing on individual powerful weapons, it deployed thousands of smaller systems that operated independently. Most important, instead of trying to overpower Devourer adaptations, it used rapid tactical changes that made adaptation irrelevant. "The problem with your evolution," Commander Mitchell's voice came over the communications channel, "is that you adapt to what your enemies do, but you can't adapt to what they might do if they never do the same thing twice." The transformed station opened fire with weapons that changed their operating principles faster than Devourer analysis could track. Energy weapons became projectile weapons, became exotic matter manipulators, became gravity wells, became electromagnetic pulses, became something entirely new every few seconds. Each weapon fired only once before changing to something completely different. Omega-7's adaptive processes began experiencing cascade failures. The quantum biological processors were overloading as they tried to analyze and counter threats that no longer existed by the time analysis was complete. For the first time in collective history, a Devourer force was being tactically outmaneuvered by an enemy that refused to fight predictably. "You see," Commander Mitchell continued, "everyone else in the galaxy tries to perfect one way of fighting. They want to be the best at energy weapons or genetic enhancement or tactical precision. But humans learned something different during our history. We learned that the best way to fight is to never fight the same way twice." The Devourer reinforcements arrived to find Omega-7's entire task force in disarray. 3 hive minds working in coordination should have been capable of adapting to any threat, but the human tactics seemed designed to exploit the very strengths that made Devourers so dangerous. "Your adaptation process requires data patterns to analyze," the human commander explained as her forces systematically dismantled ships that should have been immune to their weapons. "But we don't use patterns. We use chaos guided by intelligence. Every attack is unique. Every strategy is improvised. Every response is something you've never seen before. The most disturbing aspect of the engagement was that the humans seemed to be studying the Devourers while fighting them. Their attacks weren't just random. They were specifically designed to force Devourer adaptive responses, then analyzing those responses to understand the underlying mechanisms. "We've been watching you fight everyone else," Commander Mitchell continued. "We know how you adapt. We know your response times, your processing limitations, and your tactical preferences. But you know nothing about us because we've never shown you how we really fight." Omega-7 attempted to withdraw its forces and regroup, but the humans had anticipated this as well. The research station had been deploying hidden assets throughout the engagement, and the entire star system was now filled with human tactical units that had been disguised as debris, asteroids, and sensor ghosts. "The other species fight you the way they've always fought wars," the commander explained. "But humans have never fought a galactic war before. We have no established doctrine to limit our thinking. We have no traditional tactics to fall back on. We have no conventional wisdom to constrain our imagination." The Devourer task force found itself surrounded by enemies that appeared from impossible locations, using weapons that shouldn't exist. Human forces emerged from inside asteroids, materialized from what had seemed like empty space, and attacked from directions that violated basic principles of spatial geometry. "Every species in the galaxy fights the way their culture teaches them to fight," Commander Mitchell's voice continued as Devourer ships began suffering catastrophic systems failures from attacks they couldn't identify, let alone counter. "Humans learned to fight by fighting ourselves for thousands of years. We learned every possible way to kill, to deceive, and to destroy. Then we learned to do it better." Omega-7 made a decision that would have been unthinkable hours earlier: full retreat. The Devourer Collective had never retreated from a minor engagement. They had never been forced to withdraw by an inferior force. They had never encountered an enemy that made their greatest strength into a weakness. As the surviving Devourer ships fled the Kepler 442 system, Commander Mitchell's final transmission followed them. "Tell your fleet that this was just a demonstration. Tell them that they're about to learn what humans are really capable of when we stop pretending to be peaceful." The data from the Kepler 442 engagement spread through the Devourer Collective's communication network with the speed of quantum entanglement. Hive minds throughout the fleet processed the tactical recordings with growing alarm. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that shouldn't be possible for such a primitive species. More concerning was the realization that the entire engagement had been planned. The research station hadn't been a target of opportunity, it had been a trap. The humans had deliberately positioned themselves to engage a Devourer force under controlled conditions. They had studied Devourer tactics and designed countermeasures specifically to exploit collective weaknesses. Primary Hive Mind Alpha Prime, commanding the entire Devourer fleet, reviewed the engagement data with processing power equivalent to an entire civilization's worth of quantum computers. The conclusion was unavoidable. The collective faced an entirely new category of threat. The species designated as humans had demonstrated tactical innovation at a rate that exceeded even Devourer adaptation speeds. Worse, they appeared to understand collective capabilities better than the collective understood theirs. The engagement suggested that humans had been studying Devourers for an extended period without revealing their own capabilities. Alpha Prime initiated a fleet-wide tactical analysis update. Human forces were redesignated from low priority to unknown threat level. All future encounters with human assets were to be conducted with maximum force deployment and full adaptive response protocols. But even as these orders propagated through the fleet, Alpha Prime experienced something that no Devourer had felt in 3,000 years: uncertainty. The humans had demonstrated that superior adaptation was not an insurmountable advantage if the enemy refused to provide consistent data to adapt to. For the first time since their return from the dark sectors, the Devourer fleet faced the possibility that they might encounter a foe they could not simply consume and learn from. The humans were fighting a different kind of war entirely, and the collective had no framework for understanding it. Meanwhile, news of the Kepler 442 incident reached the Galactic Council through intelligence channels. The reports were so extraordinary that most delegates assumed they were the product of battlefield confusion or sensor malfunctions. A single human research station could not possibly defeat a Devourer task force. The very idea violated everything they understood about both species. High Chancellor Vexter reviewed the reports with skeptical attention. There must be an error in the data. Perhaps the Devourers suffered equipment failures, or the engagement was misreported by automated systems. Admiral Thiss studied the tactical recordings with growing bewilderment. "Sir, I've reviewed the sensor logs from 3 different monitoring stations. The data appears to be accurate. A human facility defeated a Devourer force using tactics that our military analysts cannot explain." "Impossible," declared General Krex. "Human military technology is centuries behind our own. Their largest warships couldn't survive 5 minutes against basic Devourer scouts." "Yet the evidence suggests otherwise," replied Dr. Zenth, his ancient voice troubled. "The recordings show weapon systems that don't match any known human capabilities. The tactics employed show a sophistication that exceeds our own strategic doctrine." Ambassador Keth's crystalline form flickered with confusion. Could the humans have acquired advanced technology from another species? Perhaps they stumbled upon ancient weapons or formed secret alliances. Or, suggested Commander Zax through his drone, perhaps our understanding of human capabilities has been incomplete. The suggestion hung in the air like an uncomfortable truth that no one wanted to acknowledge. For over a century, the galactic community had operated under the assumption that humans were peaceful, technologically limited, and militarily irrelevant. The idea that these assumptions might be wrong challenged the foundation of galactic strategic thinking. "We need more information," High Chancellor Vexter declared. "Admiral Thiss, dispatch intelligence assets to monitor human space. I want to know if this was an isolated incident or if there are capabilities we haven't recognized." "Sir," Admiral Thiss replied carefully, "our intelligence networks in human space are limited. Humans maintain strict communication security, and their territories are not easily penetrated by standard reconnaissance methods." "Why haven't we established better intelligence capabilities regarding human forces?" asked General Krex. "Because until now, we saw no need," Admiral Thiss admitted. "Human space was considered strategically unimportant. We focused our intelligence resources on potential threats and military powers." The uncomfortable silence that followed this admission spoke to a fundamental failure of galactic strategic planning. They had dismissed humanity so completely that they had never bothered to gather serious intelligence about human capabilities. "What do we actually know about current human military assets?" Dr. Zenth asked. Admiral Thiss consulted her databases with hands that showed slight tremors. "Our most recent comprehensive assessment is 73 years old. It was classified as a low-priority update due to human military insignificance." 73 years. High Chancellor Vexter's voice carried a note of alarm. In 73 years, an entire civilization could transform its military capabilities beyond recognition. "Yes, sir," Admiral Thiss replied quietly. "If humans have been developing military technology in secret, we would have no knowledge of their current capabilities." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. They had been so convinced of human irrelevance that they had essentially ignored an entire species for nearly a century. If humans had been preparing for conflict during that time, the galaxy had no idea what they might be capable of. "There's something else," Ambassador Zilt spoke up from his position near the back of the chamber. His voice was quiet but carried clearly in the silence. "Something I learned recently that might be relevant to this discussion." All attention turned to the small, insected ambassador. "What have you learned?" asked High Chancellor Vexter. "I had a private conversation with the human ambassador," Zilt replied carefully. "She suggested that humanity's peaceful reputation might be more complex than it appears." "Meaning?" "Meaning," Zilt said with growing certainty, "that humans might have chosen to appear peaceful rather than naturally being peaceful. She implied that there's a difference between choosing not to fight and being unable to fight." The suggestion sent shockwaves through the assembly. The idea that humanity had been deliberately concealing military capabilities for over a century was almost too extraordinary to believe. "If this is true," General Krex said slowly, "then we are facing a species that has been studying galactic military doctrine for decades while keeping their own capabilities secret. They would understand our strengths and weaknesses better than we understand theirs. It would explain the tactical sophistication shown at, added Dr. Zenth. Those weren't the actions of a species learning to fight. Those were the actions of a species that already knew how to fight but had been hiding that knowledge. High Chancellor Vexter stood in stunned silence, processing the possibility that the galaxy's assumptions about humanity had been not just wrong, but catastrophically wrong. If humans possessed advanced military capabilities and sophisticated strategic thinking, then their dismissal from the current crisis represented a massive failure of galactic intelligence. "Contact the human embassy," he ordered finally. "Request an immediate meeting with Ambassador Shaw. It appears we may have underestimated humanity's potential contribution to our current crisis." As the session ended in confusion and growing alarm, none of the delegates realized that the galaxy was about to discover just how dangerous a species could become when it combined advanced technology with the tactical experience of a civilization that had spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare. Ambassador Rebecca Shaw entered the council chamber with the same unremarkable presence she had maintained for years. Her simple diplomatic attire and calm demeanor gave no hint of the transformation that was about to unfold. As she took her position at the designated human speaking area, the assembled delegates watched with curious attention. High Chancellor Vexter addressed her directly, his four arms gesturing with controlled urgency. "Ambassador Shaw, recent events have raised questions about humanity's military capabilities. The incident at suggests that our understanding of human defensive capacity may have been incomplete." Shaw nodded thoughtfully, as if considering how to explain a complex issue to children. "High Chancellor, the galaxy has known humanity for over a century. During that time, we have consistently demonstrated our commitment to peaceful resolution of conflicts. We have voted for diplomatic solutions, supported humanitarian missions, and avoided military entanglements. This record speaks for itself. Yet a human research station defeated a devourer task force using tactics and technology that our military experts cannot explain," Admiral Thiss interjected. "How do you account for this discrepancy?" Shaw paused, appearing to choose her words carefully. When she spoke, her voice carried a subtle change in tone that some delegates noticed but couldn't quite identify. "Admiral, you're asking the wrong question. You want to know how we did something unexpected. The real question is why it was unexpected in the first place." She gestured toward the tactical displays that showed the devastation the Devourer fleet had wrought across dozens of worlds. For 3,000 years, this galaxy has operated under certain assumptions about warfare. You believe that military effectiveness comes from technological superiority, genetic enhancement, or numerical advantage. You fight wars the way your cultures teach you to fight. "And humans fight differently?" asked General Krex, his voice carrying a note of skepticism. "Humans fight like humans," Shaw replied simply. "We don't fight like Valdans seeking honorable combat, or like Korthax demonstrating technological supremacy, or like Zephyrians executing perfect tactical precision. We fight to win, using whatever methods prove most effective." Ambassador Keth's crystalline form shimmered with confusion. "But your species has consistently advocated for peaceful solutions. Your diplomatic record shows an aversion to military action." Shaw smiled, and several delegates noticed that the expression didn't reach her eyes. "Our diplomatic record shows exactly what we wanted it to show. Let me ask you something, Ambassador Keth. In your species' history, have you ever encountered a predator that used camouflage?" "Of course, but—" "And what happens when that predator no longer needs to hide?" The chamber fell silent as the implications of her words began to sink in. Shaw continued, her voice taking on an authority that seemed to emerge from nowhere. "The galaxy has been at peace for 2 centuries because humanity has worked very hard to maintain that peace. Not because we lack the capability for war, but because we understand its costs better than anyone. We've seen what unconstrained warfare can do to a civilization." Dr. Zenth's ancient voice trembled slightly as he spoke. "Are you saying that humanity has been deliberately concealing military capabilities?" "I'm saying that humanity learned long ago that the most dangerous predator is the one that doesn't look dangerous," Shaw replied. "We've spent a century observing how this galaxy conducts warfare. We've studied every tactical doctrine, analyzed every strategic philosophy, and understood every military system. We've learned from all of you." She gestured, and the chamber's displays suddenly came alive with data that shouldn't have been accessible to a simple diplomatic representative. Tactical analyses, fleet compositions, strategic assessments, and capability projections filled the screens with information that spoke to intelligence-gathering operations far beyond anything the Council had imagined. While you've seen us as peaceful philosophers, Shaw continued, we've been watching, learning, and preparing. We knew that eventually this galaxy would face a threat that conventional military thinking couldn't handle. We knew that when that time came, our greatest advantage would be that no one would suspect what we're really capable of. High Chancellor Vexter stared at the displays in growing alarm. This intelligence! How long have you been gathering data on our military capabilities? Since the day we joined the Galactic Council, Shaw replied matter-of-factly. We've observed every conflict, analyzed every engagement, and learned from every tactical innovation. We understand your strengths, your weaknesses, and your limitations better than you do. General Krex's voice carried a note of outrage. You've been spying on us for over a century. We've been preparing, Shaw corrected. The Devourer fleet represents exactly the kind of threat we anticipated, an enemy that adapts to conventional military approaches and turns them into weaknesses. You've all been fighting them the way you've always fought wars. That's why you're losing. The displays changed to show tactical analyses of recent Devourer engagements. But instead of focusing on the destruction and defeat, the human data highlighted patterns, weaknesses, and exploitable characteristics that the Council's own analysts had missed. The Devourers adapt quickly to energy patterns, weapons signatures, and tactical doctrines, Shaw explained. But they're still thinking like a military force. They analyze threats based on predictable parameters. They expect enemies to behave according to established patterns. And humans don't follow established patterns? Asked Commander Zax. Shaw's smile became predatory. Commander, humanity spent thousands of years fighting the most dangerous enemy we ever encountered, ourselves. We learned to fight in ways that our own species couldn't predict or counter. We weaponized unpredictability itself. She activated another display that showed human military assets that had never appeared in galactic registries. Ships that seemed to phase in and out of normal space, weapons that operated on principles that defied conventional physics, and tactical formations that looked like abstract art rather than military deployments. While the galaxy has been perfecting linear approaches to warfare, Shaw continued, humanity has been developing what we call asymmetric superiority, the ability to fight in ways that make conventional advantages irrelevant. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs as delegates processed the implications. Ambassador Zilt's antennae twitched nervously as he spoke. You're saying that the peaceful humans we've known for over a century have been a fabrication. Not a fabrication, Shaw replied. An evolution. We became peaceful because we became too good at warfare to safely practice it among ourselves. But that doesn't mean we forgot how to fight. It means we learned to fight better. Admiral Thiss studied the tactical displays with growing comprehension and alarm. The weapons systems shown here, they don't match any known technology in our databases. Because they're not based on galactic technology, Shaw explained. They're based on human understanding of warfare as an art form rather than a science. We don't build weapons to match our enemies' capabilities. We build weapons to exploit our enemies' assumptions about what weapons should do. Dr. Zenth leaned forward, his ancient mind struggling to process this revelation. How many humans know about these capabilities? Every human in the military knows, Shaw replied. But we're very good at compartmentalization. The humans you've interacted with in diplomatic and commercial settings genuinely believe in peaceful solutions. They're not acting. They represent our preferred way of life. But when peaceful solutions fail, we have other options. High Chancellor Vexter's voice carried a note of betrayal. Why reveal this now? Why maintain this deception for so long? Because revealing it before now would have been counterproductive, Shaw answered. If the galaxy had known humanity's true military capabilities, you would have either tried to suppress us or incorporate us into your existing power structures. Either way, you would have wasted our greatest advantage. Which is the element of surprise, Shaw said simply. The Devourers have adapted to every conventional approach because they understand conventional thinking. They've analyzed Valdan genetic enhancements, Korthak's technological superiority, and Zephyrian tactical precision. They know how you think about warfare. She gestured to the tactical displays again. But they have no data on human military doctrine because until now, humanity has never been at war with anyone but ourselves. They can't adapt to approaches they've never encountered. General Krex slammed his clawed fist on his control panel. You've manipulated this entire crisis for your own strategic advantage. Shaw's expression hardened slightly. General, we've prepared for this crisis while the rest of the galaxy ignored it. You've known about the Devourer threat for 3,000 years, yet you made no fundamental changes to your military thinking. You assumed that the same approaches that worked before would work again. And you knew they wouldn't. We knew that any enemy with adaptive capabilities would eventually overcome conventional military doctrine, Shaw replied. So we developed unconventional military doctrine. We prepared for a war that couldn't be won through superior technology or genetic enhancement or tactical precision alone. Commander Zax's drone stepped forward. What exactly are you proposing? Shaw's demeanor shifted again, becoming more businesslike. The Galactic Council has two choices. You can continue fighting the Devourers using conventional approaches, in which case you will lose within months. Or you can accept humanity's assistance in implementing military strategies that the Devourers cannot predict or adapt to. And what would such assistance cost? Asked High Chancellor Vexter. Nothing, Shaw replied, surprising everyone. Humanity has no interest in galactic conquest or political dominance. We want the same thing you do, to defeat the Devourer threat and return to peaceful coexistence. But we want to do it in a way that actually works. Ambassador Keth's form flickered with suspicion. Why should we trust a species that has deceived us for over a century? Shaw considered the question seriously. Because, Ambassador, you don't have any other choice. Your greatest military forces have been defeated. Your most advanced weapons have been turned against you. Your conventional strategies have failed completely. You can trust humanity or you can face extinction. She activated a final display that showed real-time tactical scenarios. The Devourer fleet will reach the core worlds within 6 weeks. Using current galactic military assets and strategies, you will lose. Using human capabilities and doctrine, we can not only stop them but drive them back permanently. How? Demanded Admiral Thiss. Shaw's smile became genuinely friendly for the first time since her revelation had begun. Admiral, that's what I'm here to explain. But first, you need to understand that winning this war requires more than just new weapons or better tactics. It requires thinking about warfare in ways that the Devourers cannot comprehend or adapt to. She gestured to include the entire assembly. The galaxy has spent 3,000 years trying to perfect warfare. Humanity spent 10,000 years learning that perfection is the enemy of effectiveness. We learned that the best way to fight is to never fight the same way twice. High Chancellor Vexter looked around the chamber at his fellow delegates, seeing uncertainty, fear, and growing desperation in their expressions. The choice Shaw was offering wasn't really a choice at all. It was an ultimatum delivered with diplomatic courtesy. What do you need from us? He asked finally. Shaw's expression became all business. Complete operational autonomy for human forces, access to all Devourer engagement data, real-time intelligence sharing, and most importantly, the willingness to implement tactical approaches that will violate every principle of conventional military doctrine. And if we agree to these terms? Shaw's smile returned, but this time it carried a promise that was both reassuring and terrifying. Then the galaxy gets to discover what happens when humans stop pretending to be harmless. As the session concluded with reluctant agreement to humanity's terms, none of the delegates fully understood what they had just authorized. They were about to witness the transformation of galactic warfare from a science based on predictable principles into an art form that treated unpredictability as the ultimate weapon. In secure facilities across human space, ancient protocols were reaching final activation stages. The masquerade that had protected humanity for over a century was ending. The galaxy was about to learn that choosing peace and being incapable of war were very different things, and humanity had become masters of both. The Devourer fleet's final assault on the core worlds began with perfect tactical precision. Alpha Prime had analyzed every previous galactic defense strategy and designed countermeasures for each one. The quantum biological processors had prepared adaptive responses for every known weapon system, tactical doctrine, and defensive configuration in the galactic military database. What Alpha Prime had not prepared for was an enemy that operated outside that database entirely. The first indication that something was wrong came when the fleet's advanced scouts encountered what appeared to be a massive evacuation convoy fleeing the Centauri system. Hundreds of ships of various sizes and configurations moved in apparently random patterns, broadcasting distress signals and requests for assistance. Standard Devourer protocol was to ignore non-military targets until after strategic objectives were secured, but these vessels were clogging the system's hyperspace routes and interfering with fleet movement. Alpha Prime ordered the convoy eliminated as a navigational hazard. The order was carried out by a single hive ship that should have been capable of destroying the entire convoy within minutes. Instead, the evacuation ships began transforming. What had appeared to be desperate refugees revealed themselves as the most sophisticated war machines the universe had ever seen. But they didn't fight like war machines. They fought like a pack of predators that had been disguised as prey, and their prey had finally revealed its true nature. The human vessels didn't deploy energy shields or launch conventional weapons. Instead, they began moving in patterns that seemed to defy three-dimensional physics. Ships disappeared from one location and appeared in another without any detectable transition. Weapons fired that produced effects the Devourer sensors couldn't classify. Not energy, not matter, not any known force in the galactic physics database. More disturbing was the fact that human tactics seemed designed specifically to exploit Devourer advantages. When the hive ship attempted to adapt to their weapons, the humans immediately switched to completely different weapons that operated on entirely different principles. When the Devourer forces tried to analyze human movement patterns, the humans began moving in ways that violated the mathematical models used to predict enemy behavior. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Combined Human Fleet," came a transmission on all channels. "You are facing the species you dismissed as harmless philosophers. You are about to learn what humans are really capable of when we stop pretending to be peaceful." The hive ship that had engaged the convoy found itself surrounded by opponents that fought like nothing in Devourer experience. Human vessels attacked from impossible angles, used weapons that shouldn't exist, and employed tactics that treated the laws of physics as suggestions rather than absolutes. When the hive ship was finally destroyed, it took with it data that sent shockwaves through the entire Devourer collective. The humans weren't just using unknown technology, they were using unknown approaches to warfare itself. Their tactics were based on principles that the collective's analysis systems couldn't comprehend. Alpha Prime processed this data with growing alarm. The human vessels had demonstrated capabilities that exceeded anything in the galactic database. More concerning was the realization that every human action seemed calculated to force specific Devourer responses, then exploit those responses in ways the collective couldn't predict. The humans were fighting like they understood Devourer capabilities better than the Devourers understood their own. As the main fleet approached the core systems, they encountered human forces at every turn. But these weren't traditional military engagements. The humans seemed to be conducting a massive psychological warfare campaign designed to destabilize Devourer strategic thinking. Human ships would appear without warning, engage briefly using completely unique tactics, then disappear before Devourer forces could adapt. No two engagements were the same. No two weapon systems operated on the same principles. No two tactical approaches followed the same logic. For the first time in collective history, Devourer adaptive capabilities were becoming a liability rather than an advantage. The quantum biological processors were overloading as they tried to analyze and counter threats that changed faster than analysis could be completed. "You're trying to learn from us," Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication channels during another brief engagement. "But we're not here to teach you. We're here to show you what happens when you face an enemy that refuses to be predictable." The human strategy was unlike anything in galactic military history. Instead of trying to destroy the Devourer fleet directly, they were systematically dismantling the collective's ability to think strategically. Every engagement was designed to force the Devourers to question their own tactical assumptions. When Devourer forces concentrated for a major assault, human forces would attack the flanks using weapons that turned Devourer defensive systems against each other. When the collective adapted to defend against these attacks, humans would switch to completely different approaches that made the adaptations useless. Most disturbing of all was the growing realization that the humans were studying devourer responses during combat and using that information to redesign their tactics in real time. They were learning faster than the devourers could adapt. Alpha Prime made a decision that violated 3,000 years of devourer doctrine, a strategic withdrawal to regroup and analyze the human threat. But even this decision was anticipated by human forces. Running away? Admiral Chen's voice followed the retreating fleet. That's not what your tactical profile suggests you do. We've been studying you for months, learning how you think, how you adapt, how you make decisions. We know you better than you know yourselves. As the Devourer fleet attempted to withdraw to a safe distance for analysis, they discovered that human forces had been preparing the battlefield far longer than anyone had realized. What had appeared to be empty space was filled with hidden assets, weapons platforms disguised as asteroids, ships concealed within sensor-dead zones, and tactical systems that violated basic assumptions about how warfare was conducted. The humans had turned the entire region of space into a carefully orchestrated trap, but it wasn't a conventional trap designed to destroy enemy forces. It was a psychological trap designed to destroy enemy confidence in their own capabilities. Back on Council Station Alpha, the assembled delegates watched the tactical displays with a mixture of awe and terror. The human forces were achieving what the galaxy's greatest military powers had been unable to accomplish. They were making the Devourer fleet appear vulnerable, confused, and strategically outmatched. High Chancellor Vexter stared at the displays in disbelief. How long have they been planning this operation? Ambassador Shaw, who had remained on station to coordinate with Council forces, smiled with what appeared to be genuine satisfaction. Since the day we learned about the first Devourer incursion 3,000 years ago, we've been preparing for this specific enemy using intelligence gathered from that historical event. You've been planning for this war for 3 millennia, Admiral Thiss asked. We've been planning for the war that conventional military thinking couldn't win, Shaw corrected. We knew that eventually, the galaxy would face an adaptive enemy that could turn superior technology and tactics into weaknesses. We developed approaches specifically designed to defeat that kind of enemy. General Krex studied the tactical displays with reluctant admiration. Your forces are using the Devourer's adaptive capabilities against them. Exactly, Shaw confirmed. Every time they adapt to one of our tactics, we force them to adapt to something completely different. Their strength becomes their weakness because they can't stop trying to learn from us, but we never give them anything consistent to learn. Dr. Zenth's ancient voice carried a note of wonder. You're not just fighting them, you're conducting a systematic campaign to undermine their strategic confidence. Shaw nodded. The Devourer's greatest weapon is their certainty that they can adapt to any threat. We're proving to them that this certainty is an illusion. We're teaching them to doubt their own capabilities. On the main tactical display, human forces continued their seemingly impossible campaign against the Devourer fleet. Ships appeared and disappeared in ways that violated known physics. Weapons produced effects that couldn't be categorized or countered. Tactics followed logic that the galaxy's greatest military minds couldn't comprehend. But most remarkably, human casualties remained minimal while Devourer losses mounted steadily. The humans weren't just winning. They were winning without fighting the kind of destructive, costly war that galactic military doctrine considered inevitable against such a powerful enemy. How? Asked Ambassador Keth, her crystalline form reflecting the tactical displays with fractured light. How are you achieving such results with minimal losses? Shaw's expression became almost philosophical. Because we're not trying to defeat the Devourers through superior force. We're defeating them by being something they cannot understand or predict. We're fighting a war of ideas rather than a war of attrition. Commander Zax's drone processed this concept with visible difficulty. You're suggesting that warfare can be conducted on conceptual rather than material levels. Commander, Shaw replied, humanity learned long ago that the most important battlefield is the one inside your enemy's mind. If you can make your enemy doubt their own strategic thinking, you've already won the war. As if to demonstrate this principle, the tactical displays showed another impossible human victory. A single human vessel, surrounded by dozens of Devourer ships, had somehow managed to turn the entire enemy formation against itself. Devourer vessels were firing on each other, their adaptive systems confused by conflicting data and contradictory tactical inputs. The Devourers are beginning to question their own analysis systems, Shaw explained. They're starting to doubt whether their adaptive capabilities are helping or hindering them. That doubt is spreading through their collective consciousness like a virus. Alpha Prime, monitoring the engagement from the Fleet Command node, was experiencing something unprecedented in Devourer history: strategic paralysis. Every tactical decision now carried the risk of playing into human plans that the collective couldn't identify or predict. The humans had created a situation where Devourer strengths had become liabilities. Adaptive capabilities that had once guaranteed victory now guaranteed confusion. Strategic thinking that had once provided clear advantages now provided only uncertainty. For the first time since their evolution into a collective intelligence, the Devourers were afraid. "This is Admiral Chen to all Devourer forces," came the transmission that would end the war. "You came to our galaxy believing you were the ultimate predator, but every ecosystem has checks and balances. Every predator eventually encounters something that evolved specifically to hunt predators." The final phase of the human campaign was unlike anything in the history of galactic warfare. Instead of pressing their advantage with overwhelming force, human forces began broadcasting information directly to Devourer quantum biological processors. "You adapt to threats by learning from them," Admiral Chen continued. "But we've been teaching you to learn patterns that don't exist, to adapt to threats that aren't real, to counter tactics that constantly change. Your own adaptive systems have become weapons we're using against you." The information being transmitted was carefully crafted to exploit the collective's dependence on quantum biological processing. It was data designed to create cascade failures in Devourer analysis systems, forcing their adaptive capabilities to turn against the collective itself. Within hours, Devourer forces throughout the galaxy began experiencing systematic failures in their ability to process tactical information. Their greatest strength, the ability to learn and adapt, had been turned into a weapon that was destroying them from within. "We're offering you a choice," Admiral Chen's final transmission declared. "Leave this galaxy and never return, or continue fighting a war against an enemy that understands you better than you understand yourselves." The Devourer fleet, for the first time in its existence, chose retreat over consumption. Alpha Prime ordered a full withdrawal from galactic space, carrying with it the knowledge that they had encountered something unprecedented, a species that had weaponized unpredictability itself. As the last Devourer vessels disappeared into the dark sectors of space,